A soft sound echoed in the kitchen. Someone cracked an egg and poured it into a bowl. Then, carefully, the breaded piece was lowered into the frying pan, where it sizzled in the hot oil. Meanwhile, the aproned figure concentrated on cooking, quietly reassuring himself that everything was going according to plan and there was nothing to worry about. The story then shifts to the capital of the kingdom of Astrokiller, the city of Alor, whose majestic towers and ancient buildings evoke the feeling of a medieval fairy tale. The stone pavements hummed with the footsteps of passers-by, and a horse-drawn carriage moved leisurely along a busy street, reflecting the rhythm of life in the big city. A girl in a simple dress and apron stood at the corner of one of the squares, loudly offering fresh boxed lunches to passers-by. A chalk sign proclaiming lunches for sale lay at her feet, and townspeople milled around, drawn by the aroma of cooking. Nearby, Mahiru enthusiastically showed off some omuras, neatly packaged with chicken pieces and onions, urging her to try it. A man standing nearby admitted he'd never heard of such a dish, which brought a genuine smile to the girl's face. Then one of her regular customers approached her with a cheerful expression, announcing he was here for another order. She recognized him easily and, thanking him, took his order, noting that her regular customers were the best proof of her success. Someone nearby explained that the idea of a boxed lunch was new to the country, but it had quickly caught on, as it made it easier for people to eat without having to go home. Hearing this, the elderly merchant thanked his lucky stars for the opportunity to enjoy a hot meal right in the middle of the workday. Meanwhile, the spacious dining room, where people usually ate or simply received bread, was bustling with activity. Amidst the conversations, a woman sat thoughtfully watching the people and reflecting on how strangely life had turned out. Until recently an office worker, now a street vendor selling lunches. 2 weeks ago, a man told her that their family often finds itself drawn into strange events and even summoned to other worlds. Then, having shed the heavy burden of overtime and unpaid hours, she felt relief for the first time in a long time, even though unemployment and uncertainty lay ahead. Late that evening, she returned home and, upon entering, noticed strange symbols on the floor, as if drawn with light. At that very moment, a smiling figure in an apron appeared before her, warmly greeting her guest, remarking on her hard work that day. Hurried footsteps were heard in the next room, a girl calling for her father, and the woman in the apron instantly became wary. A stern woman in a business suit appeared behind her, inquiring what exactly was going on, trying to get a handle on the situation. Then a man rushed down the corridor, jubilant and shouting that the hour had come for Mahiru to be summoned to another world as a heroine. Hearing this, one of the girl's eyes widened, while the other confidently remarked that perhaps he was talking about a saint and not a warrior. The older sister laughed, teasing the younger about her parents giving her a leave of service emergency kit. Just then, a rattling sound was heard outside, causing both of them to become wary and interrupt their conversation. After that, Mahiru suddenly realized she was standing in the middle of an unfamiliar city. All around her was the noise of the streets, bright signs, and the smell of dust, while the stranger next to her calmly said that such sudden summons were not the first time in their family. The girl with long dark hair felt dizzy. There was no longer any doubt, the joke had become reality. She surveyed the city unfolding before her from above and quietly wondered how she would get home now. Wandering the streets, she noticed a sign for a weapons store and stopped. Nearby, a woman was offering a passerby her remaining inventory at a reduced price, and Mahiru felt a sense of relief, realizing that although she now knew the language, the world remained alien. Then the young wanderer recalled her parents' recent conversations about her calling hero or saint. It didn't matter, there was always a way back. If they could return to Japan, then there must be a way home for her, too. Iris, still processing her arrival in another world, reflected that she was just a former office worker, not a savior. Nearby, Lucas was discussing what had happened with an elderly woman, and she was wondering where to begin her search. At that moment, the old woman scolded the man for his careless handling of the ancient object, but he waved her off. At that moment, a figure in dark clothing approached them and, bowing politely, asked permission to examine the object. The elderly couple looked at the repaired ring with gratitude, admiring the result. The young craftswoman cheerfully explained that she had used ordinary wood glue, which she had on hand, and, having finished, returned to her workstation. Afterwards, she spent 3 days gathering information and subsisting on emergency supplies until she realized the locals mistook her for a fugitive. So, to avoid arousing suspicion, she rented a free room from an elderly couple, unaware that someone was watching her every move outside the window. The young man was determined to meet his daily expenses at all costs and dreamed of a hot, home-cooked meal, something he hadn't tasted in a long time. He then decided that the best way to gather word of mouth and earn some extra money was to sell his own lunchboxes on the streets. Afterwards, 2 workers in aprons greeted the girl warmly and informed her that the Southern Conquest Squad simply adored her lunches. She asked in surprise, hearing a similar name for the first time and trying to figure out who was behind such a client. Meanwhile, one of her interlocutors mentioned that monsters had appeared in the southern forest. Hearing this news, the girl felt uneasy and couldn't believe that danger could arise so suddenly and so close to the city. The conversation then smoothly shifted to the residents' concerns. The southern forest could become a battlefield, and any clash could disrupt seafood supplies. It was also revealed that mages had already left to help, which made the girl consider the seriousness of the situation. 2 men began talking about magic. One admitted that he had been physically abused since childhood due to his limited abilities, while the other remarked on the magnitude of magical power itself. Their argument evolved into a discussion of how magic changes people's lives. Iris happily shared the information she'd gathered in detail and added that she'd like to meet a real wizard. Serafina frowned and quickly clarified that Iris hadn't meant what she might have thought. Mira soon cheerfully confirmed the rumors of her lunch's popularity as she handed over the order to another customer. Iris checked the price and, watching the proceedings, tried to figure out who exactly this man was and why he was connected to Mr. Spear. After this, Lucas carefully opened the basket, causing Iris to freeze in mild surprise. Serafina, however, noted that even a discerning mage might be swayed by such an aroma and asked for another lunchbox to try. The 2 men explained that Lord Randy was a rare individual who existed by absorbing ambient magic and therefore ate almost nothing. The girl was surprised to hear his name and tried to remember where she had heard of him before. Lucas wondered if he could gain muscle mass using magic alone and admitted that real food was still better. Mira then asked if he was the type who could live without food, and Serafina quietly expressed her hope that the mage would appreciate the meal she had prepared. Afterwards, the girl confessed that she dreamed of meeting the wizard in person and simply having a casual conversation with him. She then asked the others not to disturb him and to allow him to sample the food in peace. Then she anxiously asked if it was possible to persuade the magician. In response, Lucas admitted that he hadn't eaten the meal himself, but everyone else was delighted. Hearing this, she decided to sell 2 portions at once, so as not to miss the opportunity. One man chuckled and said that getting a spoon had been much more difficult than expected, while the girl insisted that despite the inconvenience, the dinner had been delicious. In the end, he admitted that their opponent had proven much more troublesome than expected. The woman explained that she was trying to create a dish her client's companion would definitely find irresistible. The man confirmed that they were work partners and admitted that he was constantly worried about his well-being. Soon, a knight named Gilward informed Mahero that she could look inside, but that she couldn't retreat after that. She quietly wondered if it was normal to know nothing at all about the people she suddenly found herself among. After this, the girl noticed that the celebrity in the castle was probably Lord Randy. The 2 men accompanying her confirmed that he was a picky mage, and difficult to please. She then carefully opened the door, and one of the men warned her to be quiet, as the mage might be in a foul mood. Behind the door, a man was busily writing at a desk overflowing with papers, while a woman watched from the shadows of the doorway. Behind him, a pair of guards quietly discussed his workload, comparing his condition to forced overtime. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to furiously write in his book, completely immersed in his work. The narrative clarified that the bulk of his work for the day had already been completed, and he was channeling his remaining energy into his favorite pursuit, completely immersing himself in magical research. The girl was perplexed by his peculiar mode of infatuation, while Knight Gilward grimly confirmed that retreat was impossible. The woman next to her wondered if Mr. Randy would be able to handle food if he did need it. The girl in the apron asked the mage if he disliked strong flavors, and after a pause, he finally nodded. Then she resolutely declared that she felt a surge of energy and was ready to try anything to please him, though the knight himself feared he would sooner or later simply collapse from exhaustion. The next morning, one of the assistants carefully examined the basket containing 3 small sandwiches, densely packed with fresh salad. He noted that this was another lunch, specially prepared with Randy's preferences in mind. Rice then explained that inside was a crusty bread stuffed with fried chicken. The girl enthusiastically handed over a sample, and Serafina thought back to marinating the meat in salt, pepper, herbs, and spices, as the usual soy sauce was unavailable in the capital. After tasting the crispy piece, the man remarked on how delicious it was, and the woman genuinely rejoiced at his success. He then decided to work harder to persuade the other man to try the same. She asked him to wait at the castle entrance, promising to adjust his approach if necessary. Afterwards, my hero noticed Gilward and called out to him joyfully. When he approached with a gentle smile, she animatedly shared that the man had eaten absolutely everything, despite initially seeming indifferent. The girl quickly explained that she thought Gilward was simply trying to reduce the noise around him. However, the boy insisted that he had indeed eaten all 3 servings, even if he had looked normal. Then Serafina wondered if she could repeat the test the next day with a different lunch option. The man was hesitant, but she concluded that since he hadn't left a single crumb, the taste must have truly been right. She was still afraid the stranger would think she was being pushy before they met in person. Nevertheless, she was determined to create a dish that would make him want to try it with genuine interest. After a few days, it became noticeable that he continued to eat even during intense work. And although she prepared special meals for him again and again, she realized he had returned to eating normally, and her plan wasn't yet producing the expected results. Mahiru apologized, believing she'd made a mistake, but Rice assured her it wasn't the recipes. It was because Randy had begun to eat comfortably without pressure and was now eating once a day, like anyone else. The knight then explained that he wanted to see Randy actually sit down at the table and eat, rather than gorge himself between tasks. The girl nodded in agreement, mentally imagining him one day joining the others at the communal table. Later, in the bustling square, the girl thanked the merchant after taking another order. A nearby man watched the scene, pondering what he just heard, and soon a knight in armor greeted Gilward and asked for 2 of Mahiru's meals. Mahiru firmly declared that she felt neither dissatisfaction nor loneliness, despite the playful remarks about missing someone's presence. She tried to maintain her confidence, even as doubts grew within her. She then admitted that she hadn't cooked anything for Randy for 2 days, and that was what was making her nervous. She was worried that if he lost interest in food, she wouldn't be able to get back to her previous level. Mira remarked that it was unpleasant to be hungry, and Iris laughed along with Randy, describing his habit of clicking his tongue at everyone. Mira, however, couldn't understand why Gilward attached such significance to this gesture. However, the knight calmly explained that since Mahiru's food is simple and tasty, Randy doesn't perceive it negatively. And soon his abstinence from rich foods will reach its limit, which caused genuine surprise in his listener. Mira shyly brushed off the praise for her cooking skills, and another girl teased her for being overzealous. Then a nearby woman asked how anyone could feel anything for someone without even seeing their face. Afterwards, the man invited Mahira to come with him to Randy's door the next day to check everything out for herself. She agreed and decided to take with her the exact same lunch that had worked once before. The woman completed the order, confirming the reservation for 3 people, including the new guest. The man accepted her words with confidence and confirmed that everything would be ready on time. The next morning, a guard stood before the castle gates. The knight asked Mahira to wait a bit, and she agreed without protest. Then, watching him quickly disappear through the door, she hoped that Randy would finally decide to eat something. In another wing of the castle, a dark-haired girl coldly ordered someone to leave, certain they genuinely disliked Gilward. At that moment, a young man approached the seated man and announced he had brought food with him. The girl insistently asked him to leave the basket where it was, fearing unnecessary fuss. He then carefully opened the lid, worried that someone might unknowingly eat the contents prematurely. Inside lay neatly arranged dishes and a small starfish, like a decorative talisman. The girl wondered if she'd see Randy this time, since he hadn't even turned to look at her during her last visit. The dark-haired woman explained that adding all the embellishments was an important part of her plan. The man, with a confident smile, assured her there would be no problem, teasing her as if she wouldn't eat without a spoon. Afterwards, the girl with long locks calmly explained that she cuts asparagus into spoon-sized pieces and sautés it with bacon and garlic butter and hot pepper. She added that this dish goes perfectly with alcohol. The man with long hair gave her a knowing look and decided to begin eating. His companion asked him angrily why he should join in, warning that if he hesitated, he would eat every last crumb himself. Meanwhile, Lucas carefully placed a stack of books on the table, while another man settled down nearby. Then the scene shifted to a wide hall, where he found himself surrounded by tall stacks of literature, while a woman watched him from afar with attentive, appraising interest. It soon became clear that Randy had used a spoon and actually eaten the entire meal. The girl was genuinely delighted by this unexpected victory, as his initial coldness had seemed impenetrable. After that, she felt like she was standing at the starting line, stealing herself. Her goal was to befriend Randy and one day find a way to return to Japan. She politely left the room, aware of how much work remained to be done. A tense man demanded to know who was standing before him, while another accused Mahiro of selling his entire lunch. At that moment, a third man entered, shocked that the discovery of a book was the cause of the commotion. The man explained that after selling lunchboxes, Mahiro either only visited the market or went straight home, discussing only the ingredients. The girl was taken aback and asked if he thought of her as a possible spy. The dark-haired woman declared such suspicions pointless. This woman had neither seductive skills nor access to important information. A man nearby mockingly remarked that the suspect looked more like a secretive observer. Mahiro confidently stated that there had been no persecution on his part, adding that perhaps she only knew him as an eccentric mage. The woman then inquired whether Lord Ix's duties and leading the knights were truly his only profession. He acknowledged that, despite his peculiar character, he remained the heir to the Vance family and a trusted aide to the future king. The girl was shocked, barely realizing she'd heard the word king in that context. Mira, after listening to the conversation, remarked that she didn't perceive magical power as part of this world. Rice warned her not to feign ignorance, as such power was too pronounced and couldn't be a coincidence. The two men immediately erupted into a verbal altercation over Mahiro's excessive magical abilities. One called the other a muscle fanatic and a blind creature, while the third quietly and patiently tried to stop them. The confident girl demanded to find someone who had truly arrived from another world. Meanwhile, the two men discussed the possibility of finding their way home in the quiet of the large library. She remembered Tokyo, the moment she crossed the threshold of her own home and saw glowing patterns on the floor. Then she helped an elderly couple who mistook her for a runaway, leading them to offer her a free room. Her disappointment grew, as no one believed the story to be true. Two knights listened to her with conflicting feelings, and one of them reported that the investigation had found nothing unusual in her past. One of the men explained that he had begun his investigation by searching for a girl named Mahiro in the area around the castle, but had found no record of her crossing the gate or any information about her in the city registers. Another man mused that people could theoretically arrive from other worlds. His interlocutor admitted it was difficult to deny such a possibility, and the woman standing next to him listened silently, trying to imagine such a reality. Rice quietly explained to Serafina that ancient treatises on summoning techniques did indeed exist, but had been lost over the centuries, and not a single reliable example survives today. He added that the difference in power between modern mages and those who lived in the Age of Legends is so great that comparison is hardly possible. Iris was stunned by the hint of a human sacrifice and immediately asked if another life was required to perform a reverse summoning. Serafina calmly noted that she had never seen any records requiring such a sacrifice. The cloaked figure then explained that only semi-legendary accounts of summoning rituals exist, the authenticity of which many doubt. The armored knight admitted that it was impossible to confirm the veracity of these ancient stories. The girl wondered if returning home was possible through forbidden arts, even if they were risky. However, the man next to her warned her that such a path would require finding a mage skilled in summoning techniques, and it was far from certain that such people still existed. Then the discussion became more serious. The knight's steely voice spoke of the dangers of abusing such knowledge. Another member of the group discussed the desire of some to obtain power from another world, and a woman asked whether such practices required sacrifice. The man in black declared that they needed to find out who had summoned them here and for what purpose. The girl anxiously admitted that she might not possess any power at all, while he clutched his wooden staff tightly. After this, Rice created a glowing magical visualization in the air, explaining that each mage's form of power is unique. Serafina and the other observer reacted with a mixture of surprise and bewildered interest. The girl explained that she was able to see other people's magical energy without much effort, so the methods she used were more likely to simplify observation than to create any effect. Iris noted with admiration that Mr. Randy's magic seemed to glow with divine light. Rice confirmed her words and added that the structure of his power was unusual, which left Randy looking slightly puzzled. Soon, Randy couldn't help but burst out laughing after lightly hitting one of the people present, who cautioned him about using force too much. Randy noted that he had softened the flow of energy, otherwise, it would have been impossible to avoid the blow. Iris couldn't hide her delight as she examined the magical techniques and compared them to the games of her former world. She attempted to recreate a fire spell, causing genuine surprise among the two men. The girl wondered if she had really just used the spell formula, and the two companions discussed the strange pronunciation, admitting that they had not grasped its meaning. She then suggested that the verbal formula itself might be untranslatable, recalling that she had never had any difficulties with language. Meanwhile, the two men concluded that she was an ordinary girl, and she merely listened silently to their conclusions. Serafina approached the group carrying a new bento, enjoying their lively conversation and inquiring when they planned to deliver her lunch. One of the observers mentally dismissed his old suspicions that she might be a scout. The girl wondered who was standing before her, and the man suggested she at least wait in his room for dinner. He addressed her by his formal title, Prince Darius, which immediately clarified her situation. The stunned girl soon realized she was standing before a member of royal blood. The prince, with a slight smile, presented her with a lunchbox and asked her to wait a moment while he prepared the treats for their shared meal. Mira, not hiding her surprise, tried to understand why His Highness was eating a simple boxed lunch, since he surely had a personal chef. Rice explained that the court chef often avoided cooking during the day due to the prince's sudden departures. One of her companions, beaming with calm, assured her there was nothing to worry about. The girl suddenly realized she'd heard someone's voice alone, as there was no one else around the room. Later, in the library, Iris explained that Mahiru was a visitor from another world, transported here by an unknown force. Lucas confirmed that such a summons could very well conceal someone's malicious intent. Then one of the participants suggested assigning security to accompany Mahira and prevent any threats. He approached Randy, considering the possibility that she might be the unknown summoner's target. The woman said rumors about the young lunchbox saleswoman had even reached her, and she suspected that a summoner was already searching for Mahiru. She insisted that she continue selling, as this could lure out her summoner. The dark-haired girl readily agreed to this plan. After this, one of the men suggested discovering the enemy's true purpose and mentioned Randy's interest in the strange effects of her spell on magic. The other participant in the conversation earnestly supported the need for an investigation. He explained that the original idea was to coax the reluctant Randy into guarding him and simultaneously using him as bait for the summoner. However, the implementation didn't quite go as planned. Later, the maid and butler expressed admiration and understanding for their master's absence. He immediately explained that the girl was participating in everything that was happening only by order of Prince Darius and ordered that a room be prepared for her without delay. The girl clarified that the mansion was protected by a powerful barrier, often used in the castle for testing. The maid gently assured her that her master was rarely home, but that there was no need to worry. They showed an empty room with a cozy fireplace, and one of the characters remarked that Randy rarely came home because he used the teleporter for work. He then admitted there was another reason, which he didn't dare discuss yet. Later, the girl lay down on the enormous, overly soft bed and was amazed by the luxury of the house. Meanwhile, the maid offered to help in any way she could, while the young man felt uneasy, guilty for living in such comfort while guarding her. Serafina happily remarked on how delicious the dinner looked just as Iris announced that she had prepared the evening meal and invited everyone to the table. The girl ate with pleasure, noting the tenderness of the cheese and the softness of the vegetables. Others at the table also praised Iris for her skill and especially for the delicious sauce, sharing their delight. Another girl thought it was offensive that the master didn't appreciate her lunchboxes. Meanwhile, two servants worried about his eating habits and admitted they only cleaned the rooms as he instructed, without interfering with his routine. The girl admitted she wouldn't mind eating one of those lunchboxes herself, after which the other promised to make a lot of them, which was met with warm approval. Off to the side, the two discussed who exactly eats the food Miss Mahira sells. Serafina reflected on how deeply Randy was immersed in his magical research. Nearby, Irina and another woman were preparing a multitude of lunchboxes, hoping he would appreciate the dinner. At that moment, a magic circle mercilessly glowed nearby. Mira excitedly presented the prepared boxes to Rice, who looked surprised. She asked him to keep an eye on them while she went to sell the next batch. In the hallway, Iris caught sight of Rice's scarred back and quickly apologized. He calmly assured her the wound was old and no longer hurt, and then they headed for the exit together. Serafina handed Randy a wicker lunchbox, noting that working constantly without proper meals was pointless. He listened to her with a surprised expression, as if he hadn't expected such concern. The man calmly showed her the scar on his hand and explained that he had sustained the injury as a child, before he began studying magic. His interlocutor was surprised and asked him to explain exactly what had happened. She recalled the moment she nearly died saving Prince Darius. He explained that the protective barrier had been strengthened precisely after he risked his life for the heir. The girl admitted that she had always considered him a great mage. Lucas remarked that he'd definitely eat the lunchbox upon his return and encouraged them to move on. Serafina, with an inspired grin, replied that she'd be happy to work with him again. A few days after the plan to lure the summoner away by selling lunches began, the cheerful girl was once again loudly offering lunchboxes. At this point, a passerby noticed something strange and stopped in curiosity. Lucas focused on studying summoning techniques and explained to Serafina that Randy was using air magic to reduce his workload while accompanying her. They then discussed the state of Japan and possible clues related to the summoning. The young man spoke with amazement about Japanese technology, doubting whether it was truly possible to talk to anyone at any distance. The girl confidently explained that the telephone allows voice transmission from any location, regardless of distance. She then added that the image and sound could be sent anywhere, not just to Japan, but to other countries as well. The man tried to clarify whether she was hinting at the ability to shape the voice and transmit it like an object. The girl gave an example, explaining that sound can be stored like on discs or voice recorders, and the boy asked what all this was used for. She had already begun to explain, recalling numerous everyday applications. Afterwards, she calmly reflected on how quiet everything had been in the last few days, selling lunchboxes, gathering ingredients, listening to rumors, and not a single incident in 5 days. Then he warned her not to relax, and she wondered if there really were so many unconventional mages around. The girl asked if he had a list of mages capable of summoning. The young man replied that he would check anyone connected to the army and had already studied the most skilled ones, although he felt unsure about this. Serafina calmly told Rice he was free to act as he wished if the summoning's side effect could bring him home, but she also asked him not to put himself in danger. Rice, however, insisted he was already investigating. Then she asked if it was okay to simply stay away because of the risk. He gave her a stern look and acknowledged his harshness, but immediately insisted that she practice magic if she had free time, and she quickly agreed. Meanwhile, Mira stood by the building, concentrating, calling upon the wind, chanting the element's name. When the air current obediently responded, she joyfully realized her attempt had been successful. She then listed the basic elemental spells for herself: fire for igniting, water for creating currents, and wind for controlling air masses. The magic worked faster when spoken aloud or with concentrated thought. Trying Japanese expressions, she achieved further success. The girl concentrated on testing whether intense desire could give power to a form. She tried to freeze the swirling liquid, and it unexpectedly solidified and shattered into shards like glass. Mira hurried after Serafina, asking for milk so she could continue her experiment, as she had succeeded in creating ice. Serafina noted that while ice storage facilities existed in the world, only a mage could create such ice. The girl remembered that buying ice was an excessive luxury, so she decided to make her own custard, carefully mixing milk, sugar, and eggs. She then intended to freeze the mixture after it cooled, while a woman standing nearby watched with genuine interest. Serafina vividly described the cooking steps, bringing the sugar syrup to a boil and monitoring its thickness. Once finished, she carefully tasted the result and wondered how successful the dish had been. Mira handed the mysterious delicacy to Iris, who, having tasted it, softened, completely surrendering to the pleasant taste, which noticeably lifted her spirits. Two maids were excitedly discussing how delicious the meal was and decided to surprise Master Mark by sending some of it to their master. One of them savored the taste, her eyes closed in pleasure. In another wing of the castle, Randy asked another man what he needed, who nervously denied needing anything. At that moment, a girl in an apron stood on a glowing magic circle, holding a small object in her hands. The girl wondered anxiously whether Randy liked sweets, and then excitedly showed the young man the milk ice cream with caramel sauce that she had prepared during her magical practice. Rice tasted the treat and declared it to be perfectly to his liking. This confused Serafina, but she soon smiled, realizing her worries were unfounded. Lucas asked Serafina if she had used temperature control magic, not just water and ice. She admitted she had managed to create water and summon wind, fearing only that it would harm the courtyard. Then, as an experienced mage, he explained to her that mastering the magic of opposing elements was impossible in this world, even if the power was very weak. The girl listened in bewilderment, trying to comprehend his words. The girl cautiously asked if he could use magic, and the young man confirmed his mastery of wind, water, and ice. He explained that even those born with multiple elements lose one by maturity and are therefore barely considered human in the traditional sense. A chill ran through her at the thought of someone being considered less human. Then he explained that wind, water, and ice belonged to opposite directions, and mentioned Randy, whose incomprehensibly powerful magic could activate almost instantly. He then asked her if she wanted to be known as the Saint of Miracles or the Witch of Disaster. She silently accepted the necessity of choosing, realizing she had no other path. Reese warned Serafina to avoid non-fire-based magic in the mansion, as her natural affinity for fire was too obvious. He mentioned that only Gilward and Prince Darius knew about it, and she recalled treating Miss Irina to ice cream she'd made. The girl asked if she could use ice discreetly, and the young man reluctantly agreed. However, she felt her situation had become more difficult, though she was glad to be able to make desserts again. He advised her not to look so gloomy, assuring her that no one would know her secret at first sight. If she didn't use this magic, no one would ever be able to discover it. The girl wondered if he was trying to cheer her up. Later, the young man finished his meal and remarked that it was delicious. Meanwhile, the dark-haired figure remarked that he usually looked much more gloomy, and the young man wondered if he should even strive to look stern. 10 days later, after being told to conceal his poly-elemental magic, Randy calmly ate dinner. The maid and butler were struck by his calm demeanor as they watched him intently sample the dish he had prepared. In another room, a girl was lying on a bed, anticipating the upcoming preparation of white fish, when an urgent call for the master was heard, clearly demanding her attention. The young man abruptly entered the bedroom, followed by a nervous maid. He asked why dinner was so late, admitting he was taken aback. The cheerful girl explained that the owner had come home early, eager to try Maharu's cooking. At this point, one man wiped away a tear, while the other expressed doubt that this was the case. The girl reflected on how unexpected it was that he'd returned for dinner after she'd only mentioned it jokingly. A young man nearby offered to make ice cream, and another mentioned some cheap white fish they'd bought at the market. The girl noted the sauce's odd hue, while another participant explained that a mixture of mayonnaise and ketchup creates a delicate sauce similar to bechamel. Serafina fried the rice balls, explaining to the onlookers how to generously coat them with sauce. Then she announced with satisfaction that the crispy rice balls with mayo chap were ready. She thought it was time to prepare their portion, recalling her previous preparations. A woman nearby remarked that the owner would surely be looking forward to this dish, and another wondered what it would taste like, reflecting on the small portions prepared especially for Randy. The girl thought back to her conscription and the anxiety of returning home, while her parents enjoyed mayo chap. She wondered if they missed her and were truly worried. Serafina reflected on how Randy's eating habits were gradually changing, while customers happily thanked her for the delicious lunchboxes and enthusiastically left the store, pleased with the increased sales. The woman thanked the two guards, while a girl with a basket nearby watched the proceedings. Meanwhile, someone remarked that the day had passed quietly and no suspicious person had been spotted, after which he decided to head home. The tall man in the cloak explained to the girl that he was referring to the man who had recently started selling lunches here. She listened attentively, trying to grasp the meaning of his remark. Iris, cloaked in the aura of a wealthy aristocrat, irritably pondered the difficulties of dealing with arrogant people. Meanwhile, the girl with the backpack asked why he hadn't spoken, and Iris reluctantly acknowledged his suddenness. The girl with short hair considered giving a restrained answer so as not to offend her noble interlocutor, but he was genuinely surprised by her desire to maintain a conversation with him, as if he had not expected such an initiative. Iris, moving with graceful confidence and emphasizing her innate sophistication, drew everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Mira, with her basket, realized she had unwittingly stood out too much and felt a little embarrassed. A tall man persistently but politely tried to buy something from the girl, who apologized, explaining that everything was already sold out. She added that even if she had more, she wouldn't be able to give anything back, despite his persistence. Mira firmly declared that she would never give away free lunches. Amused by her seriousness, Iris pulled her closer, pointing out that it was unacceptable for someone with her reputation to accept a cheap gift like a simple lunchbox. A man with long hair carelessly remarked that, with a different appearance, the girl could have been a saint. This deeply hurt her. She felt insulted, as if someone had stepped on her favorite closet. The woman, holding the girl, asked her about the choice between the Saint of Miracles and the Witch of Misfortune. Then the man pondered her fate and that saint from another world who, according to rumors, was destined specifically for him. The girl wondered if this man was someone far more important than he seemed. He calmly admitted that the conversation had been pleasant, but doubted she would understand the meaning of everything he wanted to say. She noticed that the young man usually watched her from a distance and asked if something was wrong. He calmly replied that they were heading home, as if he hadn't noticed the hidden meaning in her question. The girl greeted Randy warmly, noting that he rarely came so close. However, he merely clarified her hint and repeated that it was time for them to return. Suddenly, he lifted her into the air, and she realized they were literally floating above the ground. Nearby, the strap of the box snapped, and the container hit the floor with a loud thud, drawing their attention to the unexpectedness of what was happening. Lucas noticed Serafina's sudden movement and asked if the pain had started after the man touched her. He then abruptly ordered her to undress, causing her confusion and doubt. Rice insisted that the girl take off her clothes quickly due to a possible back injury, but she tried to object, saying that wasn't the problem. He, however, remained adamant and tried to help her. The man abruptly threw the girl to the floor and told her to stop resisting. She lay there, shocked and almost in tears, unable to understand why she had been treated so harshly. At that moment, another man burst into the room, demanding to know what was going on. Gilward desperately pleaded for help, holding the depressed girl down. They discovered the summoning mark on her back, recalling the painful moment she was called not beautiful enough to be a saint. Those around her tried to support her and dispel these unpleasant doubts. Lucas suggested that the saint from another world might be connected to the summoner, noting that such a connection was usually felt as soon as the person was touched. The girl anxiously hoped he knew the way home, while the man advised Randy to be more patient with shy girls. He explained that was why he asked to see her back. One half-naked man wondered why another was taking off all his clothes, and a third suggested putting on a cloak, promising to block Randy's watchful gaze. At the library, a man offered to examine the find, and the woman agreed. He then asked why she hadn't noticed anything before, and she felt a slight uneasiness at his words. They asked Gilward for a mirror and asked if there was a new problem. He quickly ran out of the room, wanting to check for a tattoo or other strange mark on the girl's back. The girl suggested that if he had known about the mark in advance, he would have no doubt about her role as the summoned one. However, the young man merely responded skeptically, as if he saw no reason to accept it as obvious. Iris noticed a clear summoning symbol on Serafina's back and carefully explained that she believed the mark was harmless for now. The girl herself was shocked that such a mark had remained hidden for so long. He then announced his intention to sever the connection between her and the power associated with this man, hinting that this might contain important evidence. The girl anxiously asked if this was indeed the case. She worriedly inquired about Randy's condition, and he, remaining calm, said he would seal the sign. The girl, however, grew nervous, noticing that Gilward still hadn't returned and his impatience could lead to complications. Suddenly, a mild electric shock pierced her, and the man quickly completed a complex magical procedure and declared that he needed rest. The girl was surprised by his sudden weakness and discovered that he had passed out, lying on the floor. Around midday, someone announced the mealtime, and another voice responded, confirming their readiness to join in. A varied table was laid out before everyone, eliciting excitement for the feast to come. The young man noticed that his grandmother had prepared too many dishes, but she only joyfully reported that she was inspired by the very presence of her beloved grandson. In the room, a man and a woman leaned over the bed, listening to the explanations of a hooded figure. The figure claimed that the man lying there had exhausted his magical power, like a man exhausted after a long run. The nun remarked that Randy's vast store of magic was a revelation to her. Nearby, a woman quietly watched the exhausted man on the bed. The girl recalled him using an extremely demanding spell on her, while people behind her looked at her with concern. The healer assured her that recovery would not take long, but 2 days of rest were needed. A cheerful young man greeted the surprised couple, a small companion nearby nervously reported Randy's recent fainting spell, and a girl nearby noticed that Mahiru's loud voice only confirmed the truth of the situation. The woman offered to find out the details directly from Randy, and then asked Mahiru's opinion, watching as he looked up, trying to figure out what was going on. The girl was frightened when she heard that the princess could only be awakened through a special kiss, and that a regular touch would not transmit the necessary magic. She was shocked to realize that they were talking specifically about her, while the smiling man explained that he was only transferring the necessary energy to whoever needed it. One girl reassured another, explaining the basics of healing magic. If it's difficult to imagine the process itself, it's enough to imagine the breath filling the wounded person with strength from the very depths of the spirit. Mira questioned Mahara with concern, and she felt guilty for the worry she'd caused Randy. He, for his part, displayed a mixture of anxiety and bewilderment, trying to understand her motives. The girl with long black hair flushed in surprise, pouting slightly, while someone off-camera pointed out that there was no need to use lips at all, hinting at the playful undertone of the situation. She admitted to herself that a kiss would have been romantic, but she opted for his hand, deciding it would be more discreet. The man, however, explained that a light touch on the forehead or cheek would suffice. The woman gently took the wounded Randy by the hand and wished him a speedy recovery. The scene then shifted to the castle, where a young man greeted him and asked if he had had time to rest. The prone man apologized for his weakness, but was told not to get up for now. The cloaked woman asked for an explanation for the excessive use of magic, mentioning a connection to Doyle and their possible involvement in the summoning. The girl said that after Doyle's touch, a scarlet lily-shaped mark appeared on her skin, and the man remarked that his own cyclamen symbol activated magic. She couldn't help but notice that the two marks were completely different from each other. The man then explained that in ancient times, slaves were branded with similar symbols, and Mahira's mark resembled such seals. He added that Randy sealed it to prevent Doyle from tracking the girl, but warned that the risk of detection still remained. The silver-haired woman noted that Doyle possessed a vast magical reserve, but was completely inept in the art of magic. She believed someone was using him as a source of energy to summon a saint, and the true summoner remained in the shadows. The man with the gemstone on his forehead smiled softly, warning them to be careful, as the puppeteer could disappear at any moment. The girl contemplated the possibility of using magic again, and those watching saw her tremble with tension. He then instructed Mahiru to look after Randy while he explored the surrounding area. He reminded her that it would take 2 days for him to fully recover, and she cheerfully agreed to be responsible for his nutrition and care. The girl considered making light rice porridge for Randy, but was worried it would be too bland. So she decided to cook the local grain in a richer form and try making a delicate risotto. A soft smile from one girl reassured her friend, and the man quietly laughed, watching the scene. The woman next to him noted with relief that the picky Randy was showing an appetite again. The girl quietly opened the door and realized she could now speak to him freely. He explained that he had been replenishing his magical power on the king's advice and admitted that he had unwittingly burdened her with his condition. She confidently relayed Prince Darius's words about keeping him in bed for 2 days and declared that she would prepare the meal herself, saying he should rest. However, he stopped her and extended his hand, as if trying to add something important. He informed her that she could enter his chambers on her own, but that she should not linger there unnecessarily. At that moment, the girl realized that the ring in her hand was actually a key. The scene then gave way to the sound of food sizzling in a hot frying pan. Iris sautéed finely chopped onions and chicken breast, explaining that she chose chicken over bacon for its ease of digestion. Then she instructed them to let the liquid simmer before adding the milk and cheese, stirring gently. Meanwhile, Reese was resting in bed, despite being categorically advised to remain completely still. Serafina asked him what he was doing, and he admitted he wanted to test a theory using a minimal amount of magic. Rice sampled the dish Serafina had prepared, and she watched silently, listening to his every movement. He suddenly asked why she was staring at him so intently, and she quietly softened her gaze, feeling a little awkward. Mira suggested Randy try the breakfast the next day. He paused thoughtfully, considering her words, and after a moment, she smiled brightly, delighted by his silent agreement. Lucas remembered his own grandmother smiling like that and happily cooking for him. At the same time, he regretted not being able to be there for her as a caring grandson should be at the end of her life. The boy explained that he was born in a remote region where magic was feared and abandoned in the forest as a gifted child. He was found by a strange woman who called herself his grandmother. He recalled her care as if it were a normal childhood, and then explained that mages were welcome in the capital. However, one day, he was pursued and kidnapped by people seeking a reward for capturing a superb mage. He recounted how he was held captive as a guinea pig and tortured for every attempt to escape. Only a rescue party led by Prince Darius managed to free him during his final escape. When the girl mentioned his grandmother, he recalled how she cooked every day in anticipation of her grandson. He then confessed that in recent years she no longer recognized him, but still sent people into the forest to look for the child. He mused that she'd cooked his favorite dishes until the very end, never seeing him again. She cautiously suggested that this was why he'd stopped eating normal food, as if trying to hold on to the memory of her. A man lying in bed told the woman sitting next to him that after the death of a loved one, he had lost the ability to enjoy food. Over time, he had become completely dependent on magic for sustenance, gradually forgetting the very taste of food. Lying on his bed, Lucas recalled the doctor's words about her symptoms being explained by her age. But he still blamed himself for allowing her to go into the forest alone so often. She thought that he probably didn't want his grandmother to know about his return, and when he talked about the impossibility of being a good grandson, he meant that he left her waiting in vain, without showing due care. The young man explained that he had studied magic under His Highness for 10 years, and then was surprised by the sudden change in the conversation. The girl admitted that she herself hadn't noticed where they had gone. The woman turned away, categorically refusing to participate, and the man thought about how happy Randy would be if he could once again taste the taste that his grandmother once cooked. The girl passionately declared that she intended to recreate the forgotten tastes, confident that a similar dish would awaken Randy's memories of those days. The cheerful woman promised to prepare a variety of dishes for the sick man, and he listened to her with an even, almost peaceful expression on his face. Then someone raised a bowl and asked for help sampling the various dishes, emphasizing that only those present could do so. At that moment, there was a light knock on the door. The girl knocked hesitantly, afraid to enter without permission. The serious-looking man told her she didn't have to rush in, but she slowly entered and addressed him as Lord Randy. A graceful woman in an elegant dress entered the room, mentioning news of her illness. The young girl, struck by her beauty, wondered what exactly had happened to cause her to faint. The man calmly stated that the situation had nothing to do with her, but the woman replied that it did, as she intended to propose marriage. The girl in the apron watched silently. Mira was confused, not understanding why someone would take such a bold step straight away, and Serafina was surprised why Randy so categorically rejected such a direct offer. One maid asked angrily why the other had not yet left, but the other woman calmly replied that the uninvited guest had burst into the room herself and the maid had nothing to do with her. The guest gently expressed concern and asked what the man's relationship was with the other woman. He calmly replied that he didn't understand who she was talking about. The dark-haired lady turned to the man sitting on the bed, but he coldly remarked that he was not obliged to report, and realized that she was talking about a person whose importance he should not take seriously. Iris firmly declared that she would care for the sick man on Prince Darius's orders, warning Alina not to interfere. A tense, almost lightning-fast exchange of glances erupted between them. The girl gently chided the gloomy young man for his gloomy look, while he tried to remain calm, worried that he was causing Randy inconvenience. Alina pompously declared that beauty required effort so that her beloved May would notice her efforts, and Rice sarcastically responded that it was funny to hear this from a woman covered in a thick layer of makeup and criticizing other people's faces. Iris said that if she couldn't help today, she'd leave, and Mira decided to ask Serafina what the punishment was for lying. At that moment, the young man furiously shouted that it was impossible for him to have a normal day. Mira wondered why someone could be loved so deeply, and the man in bed confirmed the marriage proposal was genuine. He explained that the woman had made the decision on her own, and the girl next to her listened with timid caution. The girl explained that Randy wasn't particularly sociable and had trouble starting conversations at first. The young man listened with slight irritation, finding her words insufficiently respectful. He then noted her mysterious manner of communication, which had been present from the very beginning. Meanwhile, the girl explained that, as Doyle's cousin and working in the castle archives, she was not in a position to meet Prince Darius. A girl with long black hair was barely holding a stack of old books, and a dark-haired young man remarked that her status prevented her from being simply dismissed from her duties. He added that she wasn't even properly performing her basic duties. He mentioned that Gilbard had already filled him in on all the details, though he feigned indifference. Meanwhile, the others teased him about the librarian's interest, and the girl speculated whether it could have been love at first sight. The girl quietly peeked into the room, checking to see if Randy was asleep. She saw that he was awake, though he looked almost dozy, which surprised her. The man with the side asked why the other one had arrived so late, fearing he might catch a cold, and the woman greeted him warmly, remembering how nice he had looked the night before. She recalled how they'd all slept in the same room, observing his gloomy, sleepy expression. Then she hoped the breakfast she'd prepared would lift his spirits. Serafina noticed Mary approaching and nervously wondered if she'd come to check on one of the guests again. Doyle, however, immediately recognized Mary as the previous night's visitor and asked why she'd come. Mira was surprised, thinking that Serafina was standing with her back to them, and Iris, standing in the corridor, clarified what exactly connected her with this man. The girl asked Doyle if he knew the merchant who had been hanging around Randy a lot lately, and another figure spoke irritably about being dependent on him for every little thing and asked to arrange a meeting with Prince Darius. Alina was outraged, finding it unacceptable to put Randy on the same level as Martha. Iris, however, remarked that he was only capable of magical feats, and Martha reacted with surprise to this remark. Gilbard suddenly appeared and asked what they were doing there. One of the men wondered if Martha was his alias, and soon they were discussing her maternal lineage. The girl asked why their relative worked as a street vendor, and the man explained that it was done so that she could experience the lives of ordinary people and at the same time help Randy with her magic. Gilbard entered with the maid, and both thanked her for her assistance. The man in bed wondered why they had come together. The other explained that he had soundproofed the room and had encountered Mary and Doyle, who had helped him, and Gilbard asked if he would prefer to come alone. Randy was reminded by the dark-haired girl that he needed to take a break from magic, while the man reassured the two women that Doyle wouldn't suspect anything, but urged them to be more careful in the future. Mary brought a tray with honey toast, yogurt, citrus juice, and fruit. Randy remarked that the menu suited his preferences well, while someone nearby watched thoughtfully. Rice asked if anyone had eaten yet, explaining that it was a sign of concern. Those present were surprised, and he admitted he'd only tried a little, since Randy had already started breakfast. The woman told the man that he and his friend looked like a married couple, but the other man reassured those around him by saying that he had already eaten and had grabbed some extra food, feeling like an invited guest. Randy was asked how he felt while at the castle. He laughed, claiming he was being honest, but another man warned him he was going too far. The girl with short hair firmly declared that she was not of this world, and the man with the earring calmly confirmed that she really did not belong to this country or this world itself. One of the men hesitated, hesitant to start a conversation, but the other explained that there wasn't a single mage among Doyle's close associates. Meanwhile, the woman warned the guest that he would be immediately ejected if he disturbed Randy's peace during the meal. The girl reflected that her desire to return home hadn't weakened in the slightest. Meanwhile, the two men discussed attempts to return her to her world, advising patience and consideration for Randy's mood. The young man thought about Randy's past loss and Mahiru's strong desire to return. A nearby maid asked what was troubling him, and he silently admitted that he felt like an outsider in the kingdom of Astrocroa. She smiled softly, admitting she couldn't openly say she felt lonely. Then she asked to be told when the branding check was complete, and only empty plates and spoons remained on the table from their meal. A woman with long hair and a bouquet of flowers asked if Marta was in her room. Meanwhile, another girl hesitantly suggested that they go to the theater together, intending to overcome her own shyness. The girl calmly assured her there was no cause for concern. The young man explained that he had kicked out the annoying man during an inspection, and the girl herself admired how impressive he looked at the time. Rice asked if Mary had said anything important. He confirmed his agreement to go and added that Mary had mentioned that Doyle would definitely join if Martha went. One of the men asked the other how he felt about Gilbard, warning that despite the seal, bringing Mahiro close to Doyle was dangerous. However, the other confidently declared that the spell had worked and this opportunity couldn't be missed. The girl assured Randy she would be fine, saying the mark remained stable today. He held flowers in his hands, adding that he wouldn't interfere if the goal was simply to send Mahira home. The man in the bed declared that he was acting on His Highness's orders and that the forbidden summoning magic could not be ignored. He feared disaster for the king and put the safety of the dynasty above the girl's well-being. The girl considered Randy's anxiety and whether he was truly opposed to the idea. However, she then resolutely declared that the invitation should be accepted, as Gilbard would be nearby, and increased awareness of the danger would only increase their chances of success. Iris assured her that everything would go smoothly, as she intended to gather the necessary information and calmly counter Mary's caustic remarks. Rice watched her with a serious, almost appraising gaze. The woman felt guilty for making Randy worry, but insisted they needed a convincing result. The man suggested contacting His Highness, and after some thought, he agreed. The man told Mahiro he was going to warn Mary and asked her to continue keeping an eye on Randy. After he left, Mary found herself holding the baby while Randy sat on the bed, watching her. He advised her not to take on too much and leave the main work to Gilbard, explaining that despite his eccentricities, he had a keen mind and would never do harm. The girl heard these words with surprise. Mira cautiously asked if she should tell Gilbard about her magical attribute, hinting that it might be useful. Randy, surprised, waved her off, declaring it unimportant and that he trusted a certain person. The young man explained that Gilbard had little understanding of magical disciplines, despite his high resistance to magic, and that discussing such matters now was pointless given the chaos around him. The woman reluctantly agreed. Mahiro listened, slightly nervous, as the other two enthusiastically explained that Gilbard would support her training in magic and would recognize her as an outstanding student if she were to enter the academy. The young man explained that mages were respected but also feared, and that they were often persecuted or even killed out of envy. The girl listened attentively, and in the end, she was warned to think first and foremost about her own safety. He thought about how much Randy had worried about him, creating an invisible wall around himself because of his difference, and suddenly he realized something important, like a puzzle had finally come together. The girl enthusiastically suggested throwing a house party, dreaming of delicious wine and hot pizza, while the young man next to her looked at her confusedly, trying to understand her sudden upsurge in mood. A meal soon appeared before them: tender lamb chops, fried to a golden crust, a hearty pie with bacon and vegetables, as well as sweet desserts, a fruit cake and a delicate choux tart. The cheerful girl assured him she'd prepare a multitude of delicious dishes and persuaded Randy to eat well. The woman next to the prostrate man suggested they could celebrate together later, with Gilbard, Irina, and the others, when the situation was finally resolved. The girl suddenly asked what he was about to say, and the boy admitted that the idea was simple, but the best possible: continue doing pleasant things together so that no one would feel lonely. After that, he inquired if mages existed in her world. He asked if the unknown frightened her, and she admitted that she had never seen magic before, but she did not feel fear, because in her world it existed only as a fantasy. She remembered with joy how it had all seemed like a dream at first, and how she'd secretly enjoyed applying her own skills during training. He listened, wide-eyed, almost surprised by her enthusiasm. The girl listened thoughtfully as the young man explained that he himself had used the same method and for the same reasons. She silently turned the page of the book, lost in her thoughts. Lucas asked if she was hungry after talking about the party, and Iris nervously suggested making dessert. Then she wondered if she'd just stuck with yogurt, wanting to try both sweet options. The girl was surprised to hear someone compare someone to Songmi Tenchi, the mysterious figure of legend, capable of performing miracles. She thought she'd discovered a whole new side of Randy, one she'd never even suspected before. There were 10 days left until the performance with Mary and the others, and the girl was anxiously thinking about what to do next, since she herself had pushed the idea forward, ignoring Randy's objections. The girl with the scythe reported that the owner and Gilbard had arrived, and the other girl was surprised, doubting whether Mahira would be able to afford to buy second-hand clothes. She noted that she had been brought to the city specifically, and the knight pointed to a carriage with a man standing next to it. The girl hesitated, but was insistently asked to get in. The woman invited her into a spacious room filled with elegant dresses, leaving her transfixed. A man nearby offered to let her choose any outfit she liked. The young man reassured her, claiming that he would pay for everything she needed, including clothes, and the other woman added that Randy had enough money since he hardly left the house. She hesitated, but he insisted she make a decision quickly, declaring that pointless doubts were unnecessary. Another woman suggested he take it as gratitude for her constant care and cooking. The girl timidly offered to pay in installments, but the man instructed another woman to pick out a suitable outfit for her and told her to ignore her hesitation. After that, he left, and she called out to him in surprise. She wondered why Randy was even involved, but he explained that since the invitation was addressed to him, he was the one who should be doing the preparations. The man in the cloak explained that the gesture was a sign of gratitude, so the request to accept it was simply a sign of respect. The woman immediately offered her assistance, surprising the girl, and the elderly lady at the entrance complimented her appearance. The girl felt lost among the dazzling outfits that everyone praised, but deep down she was convinced that none of them suited her. She believed such luxury was not meant for her. Tired but satisfied, she picked up the sky blue dress that had seemed the most subdued and discreet to her. The woman in glasses confirmed that it fit exactly as expected. The woman tried on the dress she'd chosen, and the older woman offered to style her hair and apply light makeup. She added that Carlyle had already paid for the outfit, which genuinely surprised the woman. Serafina wondered if Carlyle was Randy's last name, and the man explained that the design was adjustable to fit her height. He then added that Randy had recently gained strength and was able to complete the dress on time. The girl wondered why the order had been placed before Mary's invitation. The man then said it was a token of gratitude, and she gently remarked that his gratitude was beyond all reasonable bounds. The girl warmly noted the joyful expression on the young man's face, who had finally found something he truly loved. He, for his part, was confident that the dress would help him get closer to Mary and obtain the information he needed from Doyle. Later, the group, dressed in elegant attire, strolled leisurely through the courtyard. One of the men advised Mahira to relax his tense shoulders and hold himself more confidently. He explained to Mahira that she would play the role of a well-behaved girl exploring the outside world for the first time. She, however, imagined having to rehearse compliments to Doyle and endure his barbs. They discussed a famous tragic production, noting its cultural value among the nobility. One participant worried that the sad themes might unsettle her and reminded her to form an opinion before the performance's conclusion. The woman recalled how she used to be afraid to stop and think before making a decision, and the man praised her courage in starting a business in a completely unfamiliar world. She suddenly felt like she had people supporting her. The carriage wheel quietly clattered on the cobblestones, and someone's voice mused that caution was useful, but fear would yield no better results. Another person silently agreed with this thought. A woman in an elegant dress stepped out of the carriage, and a man in a formal suit held the door. Meanwhile, the determined man promised to achieve the desired results, while a serious woman standing nearby listened attentively. The man and woman greeted Doyle and Mary respectfully, expressing gratitude for the invitation. Doyle smiled warmly, delighted to finally have the opportunity to speak with Gilbard. Viewers were treated to the story of a princess who came to the aid of a desperate young man. Despite the vast difference in their circumstances, they fell in love and overcame many trials together. Iris contemplated a tragedy in which the character's love ended in death. She considered such an ending excessively harsh and unfair. The woman reflected on Mary's love for this production, imagining herself in the princess's place and dreaming of a brighter ending. The others watched and reacted with quiet thoughtfulness. At the table, a man cautiously asked Marta about her impressions of the performance, and she replied that the sets were particularly impressive and realistic. Another woman winced slightly at the strength of her drink. Alina praised the theater's spaciousness and subtle design, then asked Marta about her other impressions. He awkwardly admitted he couldn't say he'd enjoyed the story. The silver-haired woman sharply criticized the princess for disregarding courtly norms for the sake of a commoner. The blonde countered that she had merely spoken before being questioned, and he had asked if they were even listening. The man invited her to join his side, promising a generous welcome, drinks, and time to change her mind. The girl calmly acknowledged his persistence and honestly responded that she had heard his position. Iris invited Martha to take a walk in the garden, but she remarked that it was impossible to have a full conversation at the table, hinting at the overloaded atmosphere. The woman called out to Gilbert anxiously. He considered avoiding a private conversation with Mary, but decided to take the chance to speak with Doyle. Meanwhile, the girl stepped forward, preparing to accompany him. They passed through a vast garden, and one of the women asked how far they had to go. She then suggested moving to a brighter spot, but her companion reminded her to watch her step and questioned her basic upbringing. She later criticized the man for paying attention only to the stage decorations and not to the essence of the masterpiece, and noted his poor knowledge of literature. A girl with long hair asked Mary about her impressions of the performance, recalling that she had spoken of wanting to see a different, happier ending. Mary advised her to simply relax, reminding them that opinions often differ. The same long-haired girl suddenly came closer, startling her interlocutor, and then warmly admitted that she considered the story magnificent in its own way and shared its main motives. Iris reflected on the princess's unwavering devotion to her chosen one, while a woman nearby doubted whether the narrative had really presented the events that way. A woman with a composed expression agreed that the condemnation of the desire for life seemed strange, while another noted that without the tragic ending the story would have been a beautiful novel. A woman with long hair coldly suggested eliminating everything that interfered with the goal, while another nervously called her by her title, Mary. At that moment, the glove closed into a hard fist, followed by a frightening smile and a request to call Marta. The girl wondered in confusion why nothing was happening, and another woman asked if she possessed a large magical reserve. A third person hesitantly pronounced Mary's name and admitted he hadn't expected such resistance. The silver-haired girl turned to the dark-haired boy, hinting that he had tried to use magic on her, and wondered if he was suitable as a subject for experiments or even a sacrifice in forbidden rituals. The girl realized with surprise that Mary was indeed using summoning magic and decided she must warn the others immediately. However, Mary stepped forward abruptly, interrupting her thoughts. The shocked girl looked up, seeing a woman with wavy hair and gloves smiling and telling her to come with her. The girl felt she had no way out.